They'd never seen any cases of dental fluorosis, and on and on and on. And afterwards, the public put their hands up and they were saying, I'm not a scientist, but I trust my dentist, and my dentist tells me that this is okay, I'll go along with it. And then there was a young woman put her hand up and she said, I had to smile thinking about this, she said, there's nobody in this county I respect more than Dr. Paul Connett. I thought, great, at least we've got one person here. She worked with us fighting the incinerator, which is the other reason I'm here today. And we have won that. But then she said, however, I've just had a baby, and my doctor tells me it's safe. And so I support fluoridation. Well, after we were creamed that night, afterwards I went up to the doctor in question. And I said, Doctor, would you please read these 3 studies that I read this afternoon? He said, I don't have time to do that. Well, I said, that's not very responsible. I said, you just heard these people saying that they're going along with this because you're a doctor and you've told them it's okay. He says, I don't have time to read everything that comes across my desk on every subject. And I said, well, don't get me wrong, I can quite understand that. But you shouldn't be suggesting to the public that you have read the literature, and in your professional judgment, having read the literature, you're convinced that this is a safe thing to do. Well, there we left the conversation. My wife was screaming. But you know, that evening was a microcosm of everything I've seen since. The counsellors are totally intimidated by a barrage of dentists in white coats, number one. Number two, we get these incredibly assertive statements about it's safe and effective, all the scientists say it's okay. And these statements are being made by people that haven't read the literature. They haven't read the literature, and it's very quick that you can find that they haven't read the literature. Well, that's my backdrop, and I've now been involved in this for 14 years. And it's been the most frustrating campaign I've ever been involved in. I've been involved in a lot of campaigns, going back to the 60s with the Vietnam peace movement, Biafra, Bangladesh, anti-nuclear, incineration, dioxin, you name it. I've been on a lot of campaigns. No campaign is more frustrating than this one, because it's very seldom that you can get the two sides arguing rationally over the science, and there's no arbitration. There's no arbitration. When you think you're going to arbitration, the thing is handed over to a government whose policy is then protected by the science. And this is you've got to remember that fluoride is a protected pollutant, and fluoridation is a protected practice. They have invested so much of their scientific and public health credibility into this issue. Their public health, governmental, and professional credibility is invested in having told the public that it was safe and effective, and it will always be safe and effective, and there will never be any science that proves otherwise. It's very difficult now for them to say otherwise without losing credibility. As Bill Hersey said in Washington, he worked for the EPA, he says they're riding a tiger and they don't know how to get off. So, I was going to give you the talk that I gave in Pensacola 2 days ago, but I thought instead, and you may have seen me switch over, I'm going to give you the presentation I was going to give in the debate last night we had with the 2 folks from the Ontario Dental Association. Unfortunately, they didn't allow us an opening, a 20-minute statement, which I thought we were going to get. So I'm going to give it to you, so it's not all wasted. And if anybody wants a copy of this afterwards, and you've got a pen drive, you can have it, and I'll leave it with the organizers here so that you will have a permanent record of this, and please feel free to use these slides in any way you want. Okay. So I was going to thank them for agreeing to debate last night. We did thank them, and I said I hope that you will follow this up with debates in Toronto and Ottawa, where we can really make a difference. Now, I started by wanted to ask a series of questions. Would tonight's proponents please give us a list of health studies conducted in Canada that have set out to compare the health of fluoridated with non-fluoridated communities? Now, the reason I asked that question, or wanted to ask that question, is because there's been practically no health studies conducted in Canada. I believe there's one study that's been done on bones, comparing the bones in Quebec and Toronto, and there's been a couple of studies of osteosarcoma, but practically no other health studies. If you don't look, you don't find. If they cannot provide a list, would they please describe one primary study that they have read? Because what they do is they don't refer to primary studies, which what as a scientist wants to look at their data. They give you reviews. They refer to reviews. And these reviews, as I've said, are usually done by pro-fluoridation governments, like the recent one by Health Canada 2009 is a very, very sloppy study indeed. It's very superficial, they're out of date on the literature, and they were bamboozled by a hand-picked panel of experts. They took a panel of experts of which we know that 4 were pro-fluoridation. Stephen Levy, the other Levy from Quebec, Christopher Clark, the guy from New York, his name Sakuma or somebody. These were known pro-fluoridation, and the other 2 had their names on a pro-fluoridation report in Quebec. So we have reason to believe 6 of them. And what was outrageous, in my view, when the Health Canada was picking that panel, or rather when Peter Cooney, the dental officer, was picking that panel, why on earth didn't they put Hardy Lineback on that? Because Hardy Lineback was one of the authors of the very important National Research Council report done in the United States. And so was this fellow from New York, Kuma. So they chose an NRC panel member from New York who was pro-fluoridation and did not choose the NRC panel member who had been pro-fluoridation but changed his mind based upon the review of the literature. I mean, the least they could have done was to put both of them on. And then they could have said, look, we took a pro-fluoridation and an anti-fluoridation person that were on the NRC panel to now take the research one step further since 2006. Didn't do that. So very, very suspicious. Okay, next question. Would tonight's proponents please identify the primary scientific studies, not reviews, that have convinced them? Now this is critical. The one thing that was known in 1945 when they started fluoridation in Brantford, and it was known as long ago as 1931, that if you put fluoride in the water, some children would get dental fluorosis, which is a mottling of the enamel, discoloration of the enamel, which ranges from very little white spots in a small area, which goes to the mild condition where this covers up to 50% of the tooth surface, to moderate with 100% of the tooth surface, and then severe with when you get pitting as well. And throughout, you get a discoloration from white to yellow to orange to brown, and so on. They knew that if they put fluoride in the water, that this condition would impact some children. And in those days, in 1945, they thought it would be approximately 10% of the children with the very mild condition, and they believed that that was a trade-off. We could reduce tooth decay, but not have too many kids with dental fluorosis. Now, of course, it's up to over 30% of American children have dental fluorosis, over 30%. And I think in Ontario, maybe as high as 40% of kids in fluoridated communities now have dental fluorosis. But here's the point. They knew that this was a systemic effect. They knew that it was fluoride getting into the body, being distributed around the body, and then interfering with the growing tooth cells by some biochemical mechanism, inhibition of enzymes or something. So what is the evidence that fluoride could do that to the growing tooth cells and not do it to any other of the cells of the baby? What is the evidence it wasn't harming their bones? What was the evidence it wasn't harming their brains or any other tissue? They didn't have it. It was a gamble. It was the gamble from the very beginning that you had this little danger flag that says, you're seeing the first toxic effect of fluoride, and you can see it on the teeth. What about things that you can't see? I assure you, since the United States government endorsed fluoridation in 1950 and really fossilized this, from the moment the government supported this, all those other endorsements that you've heard all about were like a series of clockwork toys, like a series of dominoes. So endorsements mean nothing. They love to use it.